Hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of the CanJS Community Hangout. Today we have Chris Gomez, who's going to tell us a little bit about his introduction, I guess, to how to get into using CanJS as a beginner. Right, Chris?
Yeah, something like that. My name's Chris. I work at the Tovi. I've only just started a couple months ago. Chris, would you like me to just jump right in?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. All right. Well, let me share my screen then. So for my first app that I decided to build in CanJS, I chose to do a to-do app. It seems like a bit of a cop-out, but I decided to make it like a full-on to-do app, like if this was like a paid service of some sort that we really wanted to give money for. So there's like some user creation, sign up, login, things like that, which is kind of fun. Let's do this. We can sign up. I'm just going to use my name there, and now I have an account and I can create to-dos. So that's fun. Another cool thing about my little app here is that you can schedule to-dos. They can be recurring, so the idea of like taking the trash out every week, you can use this kind of fun cron syntax to determine like when the to-do will be re-added to your to-do list. And you can see here it's showing that this to-do is scheduled to be shown every single day of the year in 2014. So that's kind of cool too. So one thing about this was that I have, like I said, never built a CanJS app, so it was like a complete learning experience for me. And what I came up with was
Really fast, Chris. Just so I and everybody else has an idea. Before this, have you worked with MVC frameworks before? Like,
oh yeah, totally. So I worked with Backbone before, and then I also put a little bit of time into Ember.js. Backbone was like my favorite. I really liked that one. I felt like I was, able to do more than I would be able to do on my own with Backbone. And then with Ember, I found that like I was maybe writing less code and still had like a bit of power, but also kind of felt very like guided and directed. So. But I didn't learn too much about it.
CanJS stacked up against Backbone.
So to compare it against the others, I would say that CanJS was like very low level, like Backbone, in the sense that I can kind of do what I wanted. But then, like because of the way it's built and kind of the principles that it's designed around, it very naturally came together. I didn't feel like I had to like really work very hard to make it do what I wanted to do. There's definitely some obstacles understanding the API here and there, but overall the general architecture just came together like really nicely as I started to get into a flow. So something simple like showing this menu or not showing this menu. Once I got that component down, it was very easy to build something like this, where it's a date navigator. Or maybe this pop-up here. This was very easy to build. So everything just kind of like really flowed very nicely, and I really liked that.
How long would you say it took you from never using CanJS before to actually like feeling pretty comfortable building stuff?
I would say I was making decent progress after like maybe a week. Altogether in this entire thing, and this is mostly because I made it more complicated than it needed to be. It wasn't about CanJS. It was just about like what I kind of wanted to see happen. I probably have like a month in this little tiny app altogether. On the weekends and a little bit of extra time in the evenings. But as far as like the CanJS part goes, I think I had that pretty down pat in like a week or two. Yeah.
I don't mean to sidetrack you. I just figured it'd be some good.
No, that's great. In fact, I would appreciate more of those questions because like the undertaking was like kind of so big and so broad, and I learned so much from it that I'm not really sure like what are the more valuable parts to share. I can show maybe like some of the high-level components of the application. Do you think that would be better?
Yeah, and then like we were talking briefly about before, just maybe kind of talk about the high level parts of CanJS that end up coming together to make your app.
Yeah, sure. So this is like my index.html. This is the page that every route is going to hit. So every URL in my app goes here. The server will always serve this. And I'm using Steel, another one of Bitovi's products, to include this index.js. And this guy really just starts to kick off the application and start getting things going. There's two super high-level kind of components that I think make up the majority of the app. There's this idea of the state of the application, and then there's like this router. And then everything else are components. The components are really cool. I feel like they are like a super big win for any developer. You get to encapsulate your code into neat little things like this. So let's look at my header. This is the JavaScript for my header. It shows the menu using Bootstrap or hides the menu, and it has got everything encapsulated inside of it. So here's my my mustache template. I'm sorry, my stash template for that, and it is entirely based on the state. So each component has this really cool kind of idea of like a scope. This particular one doesn't have one. Let's see if we can get another one like to do. So this is like the actual to do, right? And the scope is like a kind of an encapsulated state for that component. This one happens to be pretty complicated, but they can be simple and they can get really big, and it still feels right. Like they still scale really nicely together. So this is the scope. This is like properties that describe how this to do, what this to do is. Sorry, this might not be. This might be a component. There we go. There's a much better one. Okay, so this is the scope of the to-do component. Very simple. Basically, is it completed or not is all the view is compared about. We have some methods here that kind of help some stuff, and then, like I think I already showed, this is my template for that, for the to-do. And let's see what else we can show here. Oh, also some fun stuff here. We have like the less for each component is kind of kept with the rest of the component, and then that's also included with Steel, so that's kind of nice. I know Matthew would really dig that. Let's see, what else do I want to control? Oh, the router. The router is pretty neat. So the router is listening to the state. Actually, let's start with the state, because I think the state should drive the router. The state is like the object with properties that defines everything in your application. So like, is a user authenticated or not? Well, we know that. What is the current controller that we're on? That is a property of the state. This is a fun one that I created. It's called alerts. It's a list of things that we want to maybe share with the user. Maybe they like failed to log in. Like, so for instance, we can go ahead and log out, and I'll show you this one really quick. So I create a fake, login, and that's not in the database, so we get this neat little alert that tells us, hey, you don't have an account. So that's a fun one. But that's just a property of the state of the application, right? Like, the application has a list of alerts, and at any given time, that list of alerts can be 0, 1, 2, and whatever. We don't care. So all the application has to do is add an item to that list of alerts, and it will be shown on the screen. So I think that's really super valuable there. So here's our user property. There's a few like little exceptions that we have to do when we're like creating the initial value of what the user is. So we put that logic in here into this default generator. And then it goes on and on and on. But the cool thing about this is that then you've got the router overlaying that state, right? So up until this point, we just have a bunch of properties that represent the application at any given moment, logged in, logged out. But then the cool stuff is that you can overlay these routes over that current application state. So for instance, this one here is saying, hey, when the controller property on the state is set to off, and the action is set to login, this is the URL that I want to be shown, which is like really neat. Like it's super clean. Like I didn't have to say, go to the login page or go to the sign up page. I just say, the controller, and this is kind of something that I got to implement. This isn't like a CanJS specific thing. Is like a property that I use to determine which one of these files I want to load in, right? So and these themselves are kind of like components. They have their own little scope. Here we can see that. They have their own little methods for like making things easy to do, like, hey, when the user submits this form, I want to run the login or the sign-up process, whichever. And they have their own stash templates. So whenever the user navigates from one place to the other, so for instance here, we're still inside of the auth controller, but our action is changing. The auth controller is going to take care of everything, but the action, like what the like kind of subset of the controller is changing. So that's happening all by itself, and I'm not having to do anything to kind of like assign the URL for a given state. Let's go back to the router.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Can I stop you for a quick second?
Sure.
So in that component where you were showing the scope for that one component, you had a new can.list in there?
Yeah.
Could you show me that again?
This one?
Yeah. Yes. Where's the new can.list?
It may also be this is state new and
to-dos. There it is. No, it's not to-dos. There we go. Alerts.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, that's actually that list is going to be shared among all the instances of the component.
Well, in this particular case, this is the state of the whole application, so this is like more like a singleton. We won't have multiple instances of this. But
okay.
I think I get what you're going at, right? Like if we wanted to have multiple instances of the state, we would want to do something like this, right?
If it's a constructor, you can also use the capital V value and just pass it the constructor name, and it'll do the same thing.
Yeah. So this is one of the things like I kind of had a little bit of trouble like grasping at first. I feel like I'm maybe getting the hang of it, but every now and again I still get kind of tripped up.
Yeah, I mean if you like the I don't like that much the whole like differentiating between just a capital V and a lowercase v, so having the callback there is also good. But I think that's a common thing that people run into, and this can like lead to really cool bugs.
So there's several varieties here. We can do like this, and then we can say.
Oh, I didn't know you could do capital T type. Awesome.
And then we can do the value like this, right?
Yeah.
So the way I understand this, and correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong here. So this one is going to get run if no value is set, right? Like this is the default. Oh, and then there's this one here too. We can do this one. Right.
Valued, really? value, right?
Yeah, so we can do that also. Did I spell that wrong?
Oh, that's right, because that always gets converted.
Oh, that's why.
Doesn't it keep the same instance? I don't know, actually.
So I think this will just get converted to a can list. But, okay, so this is my question. So if we use value, lowercase value, that's like the default value if nothing is provided. So if I went somewhere else in the app and I said new state, and I didn't pass anything to it, then those value functions or properties that are already set will be used. But in the case that I, say for instance, pass in something like this, alerts, 1, 2, 3, whatever, and that's going to be running through the uppercase value, correct?
I'm actually not sure what happens with the. That might be for type.
Type, yeah.
Here, you want? Oh, yes.
I'm going to step in just a little bit. I'm just afraid we're getting a little too low.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That I was just mentioning that it's a common thing that people will run into. So you can only do it for like immutable structures. You should use a constructor function or some version of that if you have like anything that's mutable as a value for the defined plugin.
So
can I step in too? Since we were on the topic of things you tripped over already, I want to talk about that a little more.
Yeah.
Was everything sunshine and nice, or did you have you pinged me a couple of times with things
The
that
things,
you tripped on?
the things that I struggled on the most probably are going to be like the router initially was a real bear for me. So I was used to this idea of like, hey, this URL should result in this function being run, and these things should be done as a result, and then like the rest of the application can kind of take over. It took me a really long time before I got comfortable with the idea of a route is really just a representation of many properties. Um, so unfortunately, like because of the way I decided to do this, I actually had to go with like a. Actually, I won't even go down that path. So the router was tough to get working. One of the really rosy, like pretty things that I didn't have to worry about was when I would set something in my state, stuff in the page would change, right? Like so, any sort of scope that was a part of a component, update the scope, and the template would change. I never had to worry about that. It was like it wasn't really. I didn't have to worry about like changing the DOM with jQuery. I probably never even wrote a single jQuery selector to do anything, which is really nice. One of the other hangups I would say, let me try and remember here. I did have a little bit of like trouble with Steel itself. The Steel config was a little bit hairy for me to kind of sort through. I had some projects I could refer to where I can like kind of see how other people were doing it, but it wasn't like immediately obvious to me. So that was something that if like I could maybe improve, I think that's where I would start. Do you remember any particular questions that I asked? Because I don't. Now looking
No.
back, it feels like everything's crystal clear. But as I was going along, I know we had like a lot of there was a lot of mentoring going on there.
So I just noticed from your feedback too of somebody who is on it or new. The framework in one form or the other has been around for 7 years now, and there were a couple of problems that were legacy backwards compatibility things that didn't have anything to do with how you would build a new app. And I think a big part of the effort for the next major version 3.0 would be to remove any kind of legacy that we had to like drag along since
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
JavaScript MVC version 2.2 or 2.5, right? Removing those ambiguities. For example, component scope, right? You can set it to an object, but you really shouldn't, and that's things like that shouldn't even be possible. If you're not supposed to do it, then let's not make it possible to do it, right? We're throwing out like view engines that we don't support anymore or that we don't develop anymore. Things like that are going to be a big part of the next 3.0 undertaking, right? 2.2 is new features, but the next major version is going to have a lot of just simplification of, getting rid of legacy things. Now we're going to try and have the migration path, and maybe I like the idea that jQuery did with the jQuery migrate plugin. That was kind of nice, providing something like that so that not everything breaks, but not having it part of the official documentation of the core anymore. I think that's, to me, it's very important for the next major version.
Yeah, I did have this issue with, which I think is like a matter of like backwards compatibility or something.
Actually, sorry to interrupt you again. This is actually a bug that I'm working on right now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a bug. That's even a regression issue that worked in 2.12, but it doesn't in 2.3.
Oh.
So we're working on 2.14 right now. This is actually a bug.
Yeah, so let me maybe try and describe the bug as I experienced it. So a CAN model can have a parse model method that kind of takes the raw response from the server, and you can kind of like massage what CAN will actually ingest to create a model. And so you get that kind of like opportunity to change things up a little bit. I was using Elasticsearch as my backend, and they store everything in this like kind of source property on the response. So I wanted to specifically use just the source, right? I didn't want all the metadata, and I can actually show you that. So if I do like a search here, and you can see this is my user, right? Well, this is the actual object that I care about, but then, Elasticsearch gives me all this kind of like metadata. So this was like a prime opportunity to use the parse model. But the problem was that I had to kind of define it inside of the init method, because creating it on the prototype actually would get overwritten by the original parse model, even though I was extending can model. So then later on, when I would go to do something like model to do, right, and I'm extending a Elasticsearch model because I want to use the same kind of find all, find one methods, the parse model would just get blown away and get set back to the original default. So the workaround that I found was to just like create it inside of a init, which is going to be run after even CanJS blows mine away. It was really just like a who gets to go last kind of situation. Not ideal, but I got around it. There was also like this other kind of strange bug where parse model was getting called twice. First with the original response from the server, and then twice the second time it would actually be called with the results that you returned the first time from parse model. So that was kind of weird. It wasn't ideal. Once I figured it out, though, I can work around it. I think I maybe created an issue for it, and I just kept on trucking.
Yeah, you did, and I'm working on that one, so I verified that as a bug. This would actually be a good segue into what
I was going to say, Chris, are there any last things that you'd say for somebody that's really just kind of starting off with CanJS, with a backbone or a different framework? Anything that you found particularly kind of like that didn't act exactly as you would expect it to, or any fundamentals of CanJS that you've learned that you want to pass on before we segue over to David telling us about what's going to happen in the future?
Cool. So I would say the best advice I could give to anybody starting out and trying to learn this system and this library is to go to the contributions page on CanJS. This is not like very intuitive, but this is where I got a lot of my help. So I think it was community meetups, right? Okay, cool. So this is where I got a lot of my help. A lot of like little demo apps are in this list, and then there's a repo. Can meetups, I think it is meetups. CanJS. I don't remember where it is. It's not in my history. Anyways, there's a link somewhere in here where you can go to like the full repository of all of these examples and all these demos, and you can actually, look through the code and kind of understand. Like one of the ones that I thought was pretty cool was can.app. Maybe that's not in there.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
Yeah.
Our CEO put together most of those demos on the meetup screen you're showing there, and they're literally meant for our meetups, so that every single month we could teach people kind of how to move on to the next step of CanJS and how to learn it from no knowledge at all. So
this helped
people to kind of learn for the first time, rather than having to wait every month to get to that next step. There's already a couple of good, quite a few months of data already there that they can just go through in a couple of days to really get up and running. So.
Yeah, totally. And then the other thing is that I had to kind of like let go of the ideas I had learned in other libraries and really totally embrace the observer pattern 1,000 times. Every time I would like use my muscle reflex, I would go down this path of like, do this, then do that, then do this, and do that. I would realize that I was really just making it harder on myself. If I went back and just embraced the observer pattern, which the library is like really well set up to do, then everything will go super smoothly. So that's my.
Perfect. In 2 sentences, can you explain to people who might not know what the observer pattern is?
Yeah. Well, I probably do a bad job of it.
I think it's like a huge fundamental part of CanJS, like you mentioned. But
yeah, it is. So the idea of the observer pattern is that things should respond to properties changing, properties of an object. So my application is either logged in or logged out, and so the application should respond to that property being changed. All I have to do is change the property, but the application will, reflect that difference. And all you have to do is teach build the library really. When this is set to this, do this or that, whatever.
Yep. Perfect.
Makes sense.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
No problem.
And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, David. David's one of the primary core developers of CanJS, so he's going to give us a really brief highlights of things that have recently been done or what's going to be happening soon. Yes. Take it away, David.
Like I told you already, it's probably going to be that long because unfortunately things have been a little quiet the last couple of weeks, but we're back in full force again and working away right away on where's my screen? Share my screen. On version 2.14, which has a couple of bugs, like for example the one we just talked about that Chris actually submitted. Where is it? Parse models. This one. So extending the model override parse models. This is actually a problem with some other things as well. Am I still here? It said I'm offline.
Yeah, you're back now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I lost
See
you.
that?
You're good now.
Okay, so yeah, we already have about halfway there. So the plan is 2.14, middle of the week. Justin talked already, I think, on sometime in September about what features we're going to put into 2.2. The first one is going to be a dirty checking, so that you don't have to use observable separate objects anymore, but you can actually use plain JavaScript objects like Angular does. This will probably come as a plugin in 2.2, and I don't remember what else I wanted to say. Oh yes, before we start working on the feature, there's a couple of things that we want to do infrastructure-wise when it comes to running tests and deploying the application. Not the application, deploying the library in all the builds and building and all of those things. So there's a bunch of infrastructure improvements that are going to make our daily life a lot easier. Yeah, and that was short, but that's about everything.
I mean, I'd say the biggest thing that you kind of mentioned was the fact that, yeah, okay, we had kind of a slow month, but the things are ramping back up. Like that's kind of the news right there. Like, development on new features for CanJS are ramping back up, and expect things soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have a perfect timeline yet, but once 2.14 is out and the infrastructure improvements I'm planning on doing are in place, we'll have a lot of new features. And like I said, one thing that would be important to me for the next major version is making sure that we remove legacy and ambiguity things. One thing I talked about with Justin was creating CanUtil, the abstraction layer that's between the framework and the libraries like Zepto, Dojo, and jQuery. Creating that, we started this as Universal.js as a separate project, but actually separating it out, creating a bunch of tests, and then making sure that this is a separate project from the library itself, which is going to help us a lot in making sure that we don't have to run as many tests as we are right now, which is going to be nice. It's not part of the 2.2 features, but it might be an infrastructure improvement we're going to do while working on version 2.2. And like Justin said last time, we're hopefully going to be able to release even minor versions a little quicker. So even if you have one feature, it's going to be 2.2, the next one is going to be 2.3, making sure that this is going to be faster and iterating more.
Very cool.
Instead of having like one monolithic release every couple of months.
Yep. Okay, awesome. Well, in that case, I'm just going to go and wrap up this week's community hangout. We'll have another community hangout every single Friday where we give like a presentation on just how to do something cool in CanJS, learn new things. Sometimes they'll be very low level, like a brand new little plugin that can be used for doing things like forms and like the CanView tag adder and the define plugin we've been talking about lately. And then once a month, every first Friday, we'll actually do the CanJS roadmap. So it sounds like next month we'll probably have a little bit more to talk about in that department. So other than that, thanks a lot, Chris Gomez. Thanks a lot, David. And even Josh for chiming in for a second. And I will see you guys next week. So have a great one. Thank you, everybody.